next speaker, evolution of ship production pipeline at World of Warship. One of the leads of the 3D models of the warships, group lead from St. Petersburg. Good afternoon. So, you won't have a chance to sleep after lunch. I will talk about the evolution of the production pipeline using War of Warships. As Dolores Ambridge used to speak, progress for the sake of progress must be discouraged. Let us perfect what can be perfected, preserve what must be preserved, and prune practices that ought to be prohibited. So she described the regular process in the pipeline. When you have a certain pipeline that gives you results with the required level of quality, everything is fine. Don't break what works. If you find some practices to improve this process, to increase quality, of course, those practices should be included into the pipeline, into the process. If those practices make the process work, slowing it down, lose quality, they should be pruned. And that will be this quote will be the underpinning of my presentation. I will tell you how some of the practices were perfected, how certain practices were preserved, they were stable, they persisted, and I will tell about the practices to scrap, to prune them. So to perfect something, you have to own it. In 2012, when we just started the development of the process, there was nothing else, just like the experience of the projects and the experience of the world of tanks. That's the big brother for us. And we used this experience to develop the first models of the ships. Then the team was composed of between 5 and 10 men, and we selected the icon ships that we will definitely have, and we will include them into the pipeline, into the production. One of the important elements of the process, it is to develop the database of the reference objects. All the objects that exist in the ships several times, the models of the LODs, the textures are done not to waste time developing those reference objects every time for the ships, and different designers or the different drawers will be using them. So there are thousands of reference objects, and when they are placed on the ships, they look like that. After completing our work on the first models, it became clear that that's the structure of the pipeline. And the classical process is of the model is 3D textures, technical geometry, technical assembly, and using the engine. The geometry in our case is subdivided into several phases. It is the drawings, dimensions, box, and then we model hull, we model superstructure, and then we place the reference objects on it. Then we have UV, we have technical texture to have all the technical elements that are not used in the 3D, and then we have the certain like stains, rust, and the other things that make the model lives. Then we develop the model of the LODs and the ruptures, destruction of the ships, and models of the destructions. And on the top of it, we complement it, we crown it all with the engine. Let me tell you how the model is built. Over here, you have the setup of the drawings and the dimension box, the intrinsic feature is 3 drawings, the plan view and cross sections. Some of these are transverse sections, and there's physical ones. We have the grid of transfer sections between 5 to 40, and all of them are included into the work to reproduce the model of the hull. And if we are happy and lucky to have the practical frame, which can have more than 100 lines of the hull, then it's not necessary to draw all of them, because they do not change. There are no. We have some gap of 10 or 15 ribs, and we model the hull with such an iteration. That's how the hull looks after the modeling. Some of the frames are concealed over here, latent, to show the hull. Then the superstructures are imposed on it, and it is the objects which are not reference objects. Then we place reference objects, and we start drawing textures. We have here both technical and artistic texture, and you can see that the window holes, the rivets, and other things, they are included into the texture. And the stains, the resting blotches on the hull are also drawn separately. Initially, we use the diffusion texture set, and at the moment we have a physical base rendering, and we have more physical things. We draw a map, and the map of exclusion with from the camouflage, some kind of special camouflage, and the other things. We have more maps now. That is the process of building LODs, depending on how far the camera is. Then we build destruction models. We break the warship into 3 parts, and we develop LODs for each destruction model. Here is the Moine cruiser. This cruiser was being modeled for 4 months, and its weight was 150,000 triangles. We have some 180,000 triangles, because we have done and undone the model, and its weight is more now. We have installed 300 reference objects, and we had 1 texture set. And let me throw some statistics for you on the warships. The weight of the models of the destroyers was 2,000 light cruisers, 2,000 battleships, and carriers. And we used 1 texture set for destroyers and light cruisers with the specific So the features were different, and sometimes we had to position the flight deck or the bottom of the ships, and time-wise it was 4 months for destroyer, light cruisers, and heavy cruisers and battleship up to 5 months, and 5 months for aircraft carriers, because they were most heavy. And based on the experience, we've been experimenting with outsourcing this work. And it turned out that based on the level of expertise we need to build the models, it won't be possible to get the models, because just developing the terms of reference to provide all the guidelines for the outsourcing developer would take a lot of time, and most probably it won't be possible to predict the timeline of developing it, and we realized we should do something about it.
So the first decision we took, significant decision we took, is to create a trainee program. That means to teach people in-house This is my opinion, my impression from this program, my personal impression, because as I was a student and I see the job offer to work on wargaming, I did some modeling before and I thought it was very cool. But as we started, as I encountered the reality and understood that what I really can do is worth nothing, and you have to all of a sudden teach yourself to model in a totally different way so that the ships looked really nice. This was my impression, what you see on the slide, and well, this was impression of other guys which were part of the trainee program as well. People who did the first ships were our leads, taught us, showed us how to do that. So we also had some lectures on shipbuilding, on fleet history, and so on and so on. And after a second or a third iteration of the trainee program, it became clear that the leads, the resources of the leads are not enough because the production volume grow. There are a lot more models now, and the expertise, the requirements to the models are also growing. So the next significant decision of a team was to create an art QA department. The main function of the art QA department is the check of compliance of the models to the drawings and to references they've been built on. Currently, there are 4 different areas for the art QA. The first one is local expertise, so that we don't have to ask some external expert. If we have some questions on the details, we can just ask the expert who's sitting in a neighboring room. The second thing is the work with the references. All the photos, all the drawings are carefully selected, sorted according to dates, to periods when the ships have been modernized, so that we are ready to build every possible model of ships if we think we should. This is one of the reasons we could not outsource it, because many of materials are required commercially, so they cannot be transferred to any third parties for outsourced work. Third area of tasks is the task of planning the ships. There were a lot of ships who have been only drawn and never actually built, but thanks to 2 real shipbuilding engineers who are working with us, and they have some real-life experience building ships, we have the possibility to model, to 3D model those ships. And we have over 10 ships of such type, which never existed, but exist in our game. And some reserves were uncovered during the work, meaning that our engineers can produce a drawing based on a photo of a ship. This is crucial for us because we strive to attain maximum authenticity, and the experience of our shipbuilding experts can use just a photo to draw a whole drawing of a hull. After a while, it has become clear that there is a factor slowing down the whole work. We had a lot of people around the project from different offices, from different locations, and at times it needed a lot of time just to discuss a single thing, either via Skype or gathering them in a single room. But given tight schedules or some other reasons, the decisions could have been shifted infinitely and indefinitely, and this slowed down the process significantly. So we thought that the privatizing, so bringing this decision tree into our house, was obvious. And although it sounds obvious, it was really hard to do. After this, everyone became happy. The tree is now a home. Beaver is now happy. And this decision tree is owned by our department in our office, so we can internally make some changes without any problem, so without changing them during the production, but rather proposing those changes before modeling starts. This gives more flexibility and allows us to plan accordingly. A ship as a game entity, and it has also become clear during our work, includes a lot of documentation, and this documentation was stored in different departments. This is extremely time-consuming because you always have to look for someone responsible for a part of documentation for him to add or remove something. The information had to be exchanged between departments, so the next decision was creating the so-called ship passport. Nothing new, but very crucial for the development. This is a single document containing every possible information about the ship, starting from the name and the year, references to all the needed drawings, ordnance, perks and features, description in port, description for the ship wiki. These data are being collected in a single place in the ship passport, and so no one had any other questions. You just type in the name and here you go. All those issues with the decision trees and the ship passports, creating them led to improving the contact, because we had some situations where we modeled a specific ship only to find out that another ship was really required with other ordnance or something else, when we were forced to remove some features which caused, unfortunately, problems with our users. Right now, we, right from the start, discuss, before the modeling starts, all the issues, all the components, and all the details of our ships we are going to model. That was it for perfection. Next comes preservation of best practices. Why do I speak of it? Because, well, these are best practices I think everyone should follow because they're really useful. The first practice is everyday sync. Every day, 5 minutes are dedicated to the ongoing issues, to the questions which I needed to solve. The lead can implement some corrections into the pipeline. This improves manageability and improves the working climate in the team. Maybe someone has new ideas or has some experience to share. So this is a kind of a team building as well. The next best practice is the lead check. It has proven effective. Why? Because it has been changed. Previously, the leads checked everything from the QA, modeling QA, and the compliance with the drawings. Right now, the check of the authenticity is being carried out by the expertise department. The leads check the quality, the completeness of a task, and and check selectively some of the parameters of the drawings. Some other best practice, which came back to us, this is the practice of cross-checks. When we were experimenting with multiple people doing the same ship simultaneously. A ship, well, if two modelers do a single ship, they are theoretically working faster, but it also creates twice the number of errors, and the checks require a lot more time. So we were trying to compensate for this by carrying out those cross checks. 5 artists and a lead were the group, and then two of the artists modeled a cruiser, a huge cruiser, and after that the model went to a cross-check. 3 artists and a lead found a lot of details, a lot of issues to correct in half an hour. That was the time. The corrections can also be quickly implemented, since the 2 artists model different things. The first one models hulls, and the second one models superstructures. So we thought this practice should be adopted at all the stages of the pipeline, after the superstructures have been placed and after the textures have been applied. We also had some practices we wanted to get rid of, and we did get rid of. The first of those prune practices was identified during a privatization of the decision tree. How do we upgrade the ship was the question. First, the answer was individually. Then we decided to upgrade a whole number of modules simultaneously, and then we came back to the history of the ships, the real-life history of the ships. The modernization was in fact an upgrade. So we adopted a modernization-wise approach for every ship. A record-breaking ship was the USS New Mexico, which had 4 different hulls. I hope that while I'm speaking, you will be able to find all the changes we did. Currently, there are only 2 hulls in the game because 2 others were not balanced enough. However, one artist had to draw 4 different ships, in fact. And as of the moment of making New Mexico, we had 10 or maybe 15 modelers. And with those production volumes, we could make like 1.5 modernization branches a year. Well, miscellaneous objects as well, but this is too little for a team like this. And so we adopted the approach of upgrading a ship with the presets. A configuration is being identified as the top configuration. And based on this configuration, we determine the stock configuration and the changes we need to make in order to upgrade the ship. This gives us more flexibility. This allows us to plan the process in a more tight schedule. The next practice we got rid of appeared when we created the Art QA department. This was a multiple step check. The artist finished working, the lead checked what he'd done, and then made the decision of forwarding this to the Art QA. The Art QA gave their feedback, the artist corrected it, but the lead, just to make sure that it was always correct, resent this model to another employee of Art QA department sometimes. And sometimes another employee found some other photos, rechecked the model, and sometimes gave another feedback. And it was so acute that sometimes there were 5 different rechecks with 5 different feedbacks. So we decided to get rid of it. So this practice checklists were created, and each production stage is now checked only once, with the exception of the first stage, determining and creating a size box with the cross sections. The department lead review was also a scrap practice, because first, when we had not so many models, our resources were enough to handle all this volume, which was not the case when the number of models increased. We had a bottleneck. An Art QA employee is now responsible of checking the textures according to strict checklists in a strictly defined order, so there's no bottleneck. The next practice, which can be also bad for a process, is perfection without perfectionism. Here you see 2 bowls of soups in the photo. You see all the noodles are sorted on the right picture, but the taste is the same, right? What's this about? When we understood that the photos are the base reference material for us, we were so very specific about analyzing the detail on the photo that we literally recreated every rivet we saw on the photo. With the pixel density we have, it's no need to say that it was extremely time-consuming. We changed this approach, and photos, while still remaining one of the main reference material for us, we do not try to recreate it into the very detail. The photos show the size, the detail density, the position of different devices, to give an impression of what a ship actually looks like. Premium ships are, of course, more detailed, because a premium ship, well, it's a premium ship, goes without saying. Standard ships can combine different components from different ships, and they merely give an impression of a ship which had existed. Okay, so what was our key takeaway? What was the result? As of now, 99 employees worked in a QA department. We have seven leads and 20 modelers, 15 Art QA employees, 7 employees who model aviation aircrafts, and 20 people, 20 or so, implementing new features so that the content looked awesome. For instance, for the events, like the Halloween event. The current pipeline for a 3 model of ships looks this way. What I did not mention is the separate stage of ordnance production. We have a pocket engineer who is really fond of different armaments, of different ordnance, weapons, guns, and he has the honor to check every single gun we produce for our ship models. He checks if it works correctly, if the calibers are correct, and so on. Cross-checks and lead checks are not represented in this scheme because they are, while still important, they are not that important to show him here. It looks astonishing and looks very complicated, but how is it in real life? We could increase the number of polygons twice in our models. The texture sets are now twice as large with a density of 30 to 45 pixels a meter. But the time is that matters. And it has been increased only by a month for a ship. This is impressive because after implementing this number of checks I described, after increasing the quality compared to what we had in the very beginning, we now have lots of flexibility. We can work on tight schedules. We can now change ordnance and guns without a significant increase in time, and we now attain results like this. This was my very last slide. Thank you very much for your attention. I hope you have questions, and I'm ready to answer them. Thank you.
Спасибо большое, Александр. Задавайте вопросы.
Thanks a lot, Alexander. Questions, if any? I apologize if the question is silly. I'm a programmer. Why additional texture of the aircraft carrier? Because the density should be higher or what? Because the flying deck is a large piece of chunk, and high quality should be given to it, because it is the tip that we see, that we look at it. So that's why more attention is given to it rather than the surface below the waterline. And that's what our texture density called. We could not increase the texture density, but we could add something else. But after we grow, there are more texture, and their composition is the same. And the surface area of the aircraft carrier is of the UV is much larger than any other ship. That's why. It might be a silly question as well, because I'm a programmer too. So the question is as follows. I understand that the quality of the model has improved. Did you receive the feedbacks from the players that, well, that's not the ship, that's how it should look, because I know how it should look. I used to see my naval service over there, and did it happen like that? The feedback that it's not as fancy as it should be is quite okay, but we never received the feedback that it's not beautiful. I'm a programmer as well, but it's not a silly question. Super. So the question is like that. Some of the portion of the ship is also sub-water. Do you use the same density of texturing for the subsurface portion? At the exceptional cases. Why? Because we can. Why don't you use that? Because the ship could be overturned. It could flip over. Yes, but when we tried to get the minor details at the texture, we had an understanding that we see the sub-water part quite rarely, and then at those phases, the warships did not flip over. It would just break apart and it would sink. But then, when we added flipping over, Then we had to do something about texturing, and the sub water was 2025, and then the seam was not just an even line, but it was haphazard, jagged, and if we have an opportunity to apply the same density, we do that. If not, then we sacrifice the subwater surface. But right now, the decrease of the texture is less. If it is 35 at the main one, then it will be only 30 at the surface, so that there'll be no much difference. Did you try to use some procedural approaches for texturing? Yes, when we used physical render, we used quixel, and the physical part of the texture was the same, but the artistic part of the artistic texture was used. Pixel was used, and then the artists were drawing stains and rust. It was up to the artist. Is it possible to use the blend mask, and to the texturing details could be 10 times better, not just twice as good? Zhenya, did we use detail nap? Somebody is saying something, no microphone. Anyway, it was not included into, we did not fit it into the perfu. Somebody is still saying something, no microphone is used. Anyway, all the programmers, you just buttonhole this gentleman, this guy, and he will tell you everything about the technical part of it. I'm not a programmer. So, you, Alexander, said that the major reference material are photos. What if there are no photos? I know the Gustav I had only one half a photo. And how do its experience and expert review, bringing in experts, just like that. We have 47 men who are counseling us, advising us, that know everything about the warships. We can do well without photos. It's a question as a follow-up for the future. What new technologies for improving the outside the look of the warships? What we need is the window holes to look like those they have glass inside. Model them, we do. If you pay attention, that at all the latest models of the ships, we have important things at the bridge, and there are controls of the captain over there if we have a photo. So we show the details of the inside of the ships, but given the texture density, we cannot afford doing some of the things. We cannot give some of the minor details. Okay, when you start switching over to physical-based shading, did you redraw the texture of the existing ships, and how was it fitted into the pipeline? There were two major phases. When we had to reprocess the old content, it was phase one. And at that particular time, we have found simple techniques from the point of view of implementations, and to redo the warships real quick. Then we did a redrawing of the textures at stage 2, because you cannot redo diffuse into physically based real quick. It was a hard work to do. Anything else? Not serious question. How is art QA happening? When do you add different features?
Easter eggs.
Easter eggs. How do you add Easter eggs to the warships? We do, but not for each warships. When there is an occasion, then the drawer can do that, and it is coordinated at the level of API. And there was a time, you have seen Prince Wagon, there was a helmet of Darth Vader, but we had to take it away because it is costly to have it. I'm Andrei, and I'm an artist, but I do a bit of programming. What instruments do you use? Substance Painter, Maori. We've been experimenting with Substance Painter, and but we did not use it quite broadly. We use Photoshop, quixel, and if we need to do some coat of arms, but mostly it is Photoshop and quixel. Many guys are fond of scripting, and we have developed an individual panel for our artists that includes many functions to make 2-3 clicks to do a certain content of the warship. But well, there are some tools to do that through drawing. I'm a 3D artist supervisor from World of Tanks. Ares models, Harass models. Do you use Harass models? High resolution. So please correct me if I'm wrong. For how many millions? 6 million triangles for the model of the warship to have a virtual tour of it. And we also developed the model of the main gun of Yakamata. It was not actually high resolution, but it had a lot of triangles, and it looks super, but with limitations. No, we do not model high-res. We do not do that. And Aurora battleship has 9 million triangles, and it took a team of 10 to do that 2 months. And just imagine how much effort it would take to build something big as Yamato battleships. And I assure you that it's not necessary to do high-res for all these surfaces. It is enough to do and it is possible to use scripts to remove the canvas, and you can use it in the brush. And we have different types of introduction of those features, and I can assure you that you can just brush away those features. And the ships in the cinematics, are they the same? How do I know? They take it from us, but I don't know what is happening then. Because the triangle layer looks great. Okay, thanks.
So we keep catching our speakers in the hallway and putting cameras in front of them. Hi, please introduce yourself.
My name is Samuel Ranteskla. I work for Microsoft as a principal program manager out of Sweden.
Okay, Samuel, so let's talk about games. What's your favorite game?
Well, I wish I played a lot more games than I actually do. So I have to go back into the past. Like one of my really favorite games is Jag the Lions 2 from like 92, 93. I think it was made here in Russia, if I'm not mistaken. Civilization, always been a big fan of that. And then the Enemy Unknown UFO trilogy from the 90s. There's so many games, I mean, it's like impossible to select one. But they're all strategic games, the ones that are my favorite.
Yeah, you're obviously a tactician. That's commendable. But do you remember the very first game you've ever played?
Decathlon, probably on the x86, somewhere around 84.
Wow, that's... I don't even remember that one.
It's like you basically play Decathlon and you just hammer at the keyboard to go faster, like 10 different sports events. Played it like crazy. I was 8 years old then.
Wow. How did you get into the gaming industry?
It was by chance, actually. So I was studying at Uppsala University, doing computer science, and they had this fair where companies were meeting the students. And there was these two guys that they've started a game company in the basement, and they wanted somebody to write a BSP tree, binary space partitioning tree. And I was looking for my thesis, so I figured let's combine those. So I joined them, I wrote my thesis in the games industry, and then from there on kind of like just went on. So this was 2000.
But now in 2017, what's your favorite and least favorite thing about game dev?
I mean, I think the games industry is awesome. Great place to work. There's so much passion. There's skilled, very intelligent people. I think that's my favorite thing. The least favorite thing is that, which I covered in my speech a little bit, I think that we're looking a little bit too much at how do we turn time into money, rather than seeing like how do we educate our kids. I really want to. That's my passion myself. Is like take this experience, make our kids better tomorrow than they are today. I'm a parent as well, so that's coming from that.
Well, that's a very noble thing to do.
I don't know if noble. Just I think it would be a good thing for us.
Definitely is. About your speech, did you have any interesting questions that maybe stood out?
Yeah, there was some interesting questions, like if we look at mixed reality, what's going to happen with that? What's the dangers with that? I couldn't really answer them because let's see what happens.
But if you were a part of your own audience, what question would you like to ask yourself?
That was a tricky one. Are you sure that you're right?
Are you?
No.
Well, we can be sure 100%, but still, we're trying to foresee the future here. How do you like the conference?
Love it. St. Petersburg, great place. Wargaming, excellent hosts. It's a great place to be. You should come to the next one.
Definitely do. Say, if you had the chance to go back in time to when you just started working in the industry and give yourself one advice, what would it be?
Try one of your ideas out.
That's very good. Thank you very much, Samuel. I hope you like the conference. Thank you. We got another one of our speakers here at 4C, and would like to ask him some questions. Hi, please introduce yourself.
Hey, my name is Eric, and I'm the CEO of the Do Dreams game studio based in Helsinki, Finland.
Very nice to meet you, Eric. Tell me, what's the very first video game you've ever played?
I guess when I was a little kid, my dad was in banking, and he had a lot of business trips, and he went to Japan, and he brought me one of these Nintendo handheld, like small games. It probably was Donkey Kong. So that's my first memories with gaming, and then I played a lot of Oil Panic with the Disney characters, so fond memories with those. Favorite gaming memories, well, I like games that I can play with my friends. I remember when I was in high school, we'd go visit my friend's house and we played a lot of these like sports games together, like NHL 95 and some F1 racing games. So I would say that maybe NHL 95 is the game that I have played most with my friends, and I have fond memories of, you know, starting after school and then realizing this like 2 a.m. and knowing that my mother will be very angry when I come home late.
That happened to all of us, I think. How did you start in the video game industry? What led you here?
I was earlier a marketing lecturer at this business school in Helsinki, and then at some point I realized that instead of talking about business, that I'd like to do business myself. I had my own startup for 3 years, did different kinds of entertainment apps. I was interested in storytelling in apps and online and social media. After that, I did that for 3 years, failed miserably. But I guess the one thing I learned was how to test concepts early with real customer data. Because when you have little money, you need to be sure that you're spending it wisely. And I had the opportunity to join an existing team. So I joined Do Dreams as a CEO. And together with the wonderful team I have there, we started with these mini games, eventually came up with Drive Ahead, which is our current franchise that we're developing.
Sounds great. Tell me what...
More like okay. Yeah.
Just a bit in the camera.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
So what's your favorite thing about the video gaming industry, or maybe just something you strongly like about it?
I think my favorite thing about the gaming industry is the community of developers. So traveling around the world, meeting wonderful people who make games, and talking to people and learning from them. I think it's really cool how in gaming people are very open to share their experiences. About the business aspect of running a game studio, management stuff, tips and advice on scaling and growing a company. It has been very useful for me, and hopefully by giving talks at events like this, maybe I can give something back to the community.
Oh, you definitely are. Anything that maybe irritates you, or something you don't like about the industry, strongly dislike?
Well, I think in recent years, games are developed with data and analytics, and that's of course very important. And I think all the creative decisions should be based on data. But what I've noticed is that studios maybe give up quite easily on games and their communities. So we have found that if we really invest in the community and take care of the players by making regular updates to the game, thinking of the game not as a product but as a service, then the community will support you through difficult times.
What trends do you think are going to persist or maybe appear anew in like a 10 years time? Let's make a prediction.
Oh, that's a very tricky question. So with everything developing so fast, I guess it's really difficult to say. I'm very excited about AR. So our studio, we launched our first augmented reality game, Drive Ahead Mini Golf, just yesterday. So I'm very interested in seeing how this market will develop in the next year or two. If you look at 10-year perspective, then maybe games will be everywhere. Maybe like your glasses could be a platform for playing games.
I'd love that.
Yeah. So maybe it will be very interesting to see what kind of sessioning games we'll have when people could basically be playing all the time.
What do you think is more important in a game, like one of its aspects, the ever discussed questions, the graphics, the gameplay, the game design, the storytelling maybe?
We usually start with a fun core gameplay. So of course we want to make fun, cool games, but we found that that's not enough. So you need to make sure that your players have a reason to return to the game often, and they want to return with their friends. So I think planning this progression and making sure that there are some kind of events like live operations, I think that's very important. And though everybody knows monetization is important, like just thinking of the path the player takes in the game, and when are they presented with opportunities to spend money or watch videos or do something like that, like connecting the revenue model with making the game experience better. I think that's very crucial.
Do you have a vision of a video game you'd like to create if you weren't restricted in absolutely no way, like financially, creatively?
There's only one right answer to this, and that is that if we would have no financial restrictions, we would be doing the exact same thing that we're doing now. So I believe that the format that we have, developing games with minimum risk and investment, testing concepts early with players, and launching games thanks to this wonderful, large and active community that we have with Drive Ahead, is the way that we would want to do it, regardless of what kind of budget we have.
Sounds fair. Let's come back to the real world for a moment. What do you think about St. Petersburg?
St. Petersburg is a wonderful place. We've been blessed by wonderful weather this time. I heard from the locals that we're very lucky to enjoy this nice weather. I've had the opportunity to visit St. Petersburg 3 times during the last year for a couple of events, and I'm always excited to meet the local developers. our drive-ahead game on Android, Russia is the largest market for us, and this is something that we want to understand better, like why people like the game here, and see how we as a studio could be more present in Russia and be closer to our fans, the players, on Russian social media. So that's why I'm always interested to visit Russia and meet people if I have the chance.
Well, now you have the chance, another one, at this event 4C, and what do you think about it?
I've had a chance to talk at many international events in China and the US, GDC, and places in Europe. I think 4C is the best organized event I've ever been to. You guys are taking really good care of the guests, and the lineup is awesome. So I'm giving a talk myself, but the rest of the time I have a full schedule of listening to presentations. So usually when I go to these international conferences, I'm quite tied up with meeting partners, but here I'm really going to enjoy going to the talks myself and hearing what the experiences people share.
And if you were interviewing yourself right now, what question would you like to ask yourself?
What question would I like to ask myself? I'd probably ask that, why do I have this wonderful beard?
Why do you?
Well, I'll tell you guys a secret. So I'm actually the great-grandson of Santa Claus. And that's why I have this beard, and Santa Claus said to me that you have to learn how to bring people of the world joy. So that's why for the next about 200 years I'm going to be the CEO of the Do Dreams game studio. And one day, in about 200 years, when my beard is all white, then I will become the next Santa Claus.
Really looking forward to it, and from the presents from you. What are you looking forward to? What's maybe the speech that you'd like to hear most? Anything specific?
I love all these like demos and case studies that people do. I really like the talks where people go through some project and go through their experiences. So I have several of those in my schedule.
Great, sounds exciting. And now children all over the world are excited for a new Santa. And I hope you have a good time here. Thank you.
Thank you.